Hi Olivia, I'm going to show you how to do that the cross stitching grid that we were talking about. So there's a couple of things to know before you set up your file when you go into File New here. Usually a laser cutter works on, it can do three operations. So it can either cut all the way through your material. It can do what's called a score line, which is where it only cuts part of the way through, or it can do a raster etch, and that's when you see things like the image that was etched in grayscale by burning in to different depths. So usually, what happens, although this varies from the way people set it up, but usually it's a pure red line, a pure RGB red line will cut, a pure blue line will score, and anything that's grayscale will etch. So you need to make sure that you have your color mode set up as RGB, because if it's not a pure red, blue, or black thing on the screen, the laser cutter will just ignore it. If you want to do any raster etching, you want to make sure that the raster effects are set high, so 300 points per inch. There we have it. And the other thing we want to do is make sure that our artboard is set up big enough. So your artboard is just the maximum size that your image can be. So I've just set it up here as 300 and 300, and I'm making sure that the units are millimeters because that makes it easier to measure the real size that things will be when we make them. So I'm just going to hit OK. So we get a square like this. Now, in Illustrator, you have all your tools, and they all work off of vector paths, which is just an invisible line. Think of it like if you got a very fine H pencil to make a sketch underneath something. Um, that's a path, and then it adds an effect on top of it, which is called a stroke. So I can show you that by, if I pick something like the paintbrush, I can just draw a big squiggly line, and you can see it's pretty thick. You can zoom into it, it's a thick line like that, but I'm going to press Command Y here, and that just shows me what my paths are. So if I use this little white arrow here and click on it, you can see how I can like modify the shape of the path any way I want, like this. And if I hit Command Y again, you'll see that the stroke over it has stayed on the path. So the laser cutter works by following the path that's laid down, and the stroke it's just using as information telling it which operation to do. So I'm going to go Command Y to zoom out here, and I'm going to drag a selection box around all of this and hit backspace to get rid of it. So what we want to do is we want to make a grid of tiny little circles that can be cut out. So we're going to use the ellipse tool, which is here. If you can't see the ellipse tool, if it's just square something, hold the button until you see the other options pop up like that and select ellipse. So when you draw a circle, what I'm going to do is hold shift and just drag one. I'm just going to draw quite big here, it doesn't really matter. You'll see it just looks like this. There are two things that can be done with any of these shapes. If I hit Command Y, you'll just see the path there again. The first is a fill and the second is a stroke. So the first thing you want to do is, just be on the safe side, is make sure you don't have any fill in there, that it's an actual hollow circle. So these two things dictate your fill and your stroke color. So you just want to make sure if this is just white with no red line through it, like this, then you want to make sure it's highlighted and just hit none there. Oh, sorry, while having your circle selected, none. So this is just your circle. So it's too thick a line for a start. Sometimes a laser cutter will get huffy if you have a thick stroke around something. So the first thing we want to do is select it and go over here to stroke. If you can't see anything on this side, you'll find them all under window here. So window, stroke, that's what we have open. And I'm going to make this line 0.001 points. And now you see it's gotten very, very thin. And the second thing I want to do is make sure it's the right color for a cutting operation. So I select it again, I go back over here to the stroke, I double click, and I'm going to make it pure red by hitting 255. So I hit OK, and now it's red. Okay, so we're doing well. So the next thing is, although we have a circle and we have a circle that the laser cutter will cut, it's way too big. So using our black arrow again, we select it, and we go up here to transform, and you can change the width and the height of it. So you have to make sure that this is constrained by clicking on this little thing here until it's linked. And I'm going to make the hole be 0.75 millimeters. So because it was constrained, it'll make it that in both dimensions. So now we have teeny tiny little circles. It's about the right size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it again. I'm going to hit Command C, and then I'm going to hit Command F to copy and paste it. Hitting Command F, what it does is it pastes it directly on top of where you copied it from. If I hold down Shift and just press the right cursor, we can see we have two circles now. The reason that I held Shift is it makes it take more steps in the nudge. So we have two circles, that's pretty good. I'm going to select both of them, Command C, Command F, hit nudge a couple more times, and then we have 4, Command C, Command F, and then I'm just going to do this a few times until I have a whole row of them. There are quicker ways to make a grid of circles, but the reason that I'm doing it this way is so you can kind of get an idea of what the tools are for, so you can use it for making other shapes. So I have a little row of them now, but the problem is that they're quite far apart from each other. But we can change that. So what I do is I select my whole row, and I go over to here where it says transform. I open it, and there's some tabs across the top in the way I have it set up. I'm going to click Align. If you can't find Align, it's under Windows Align. So the first thing I have to do is I have to click on one of these little circles. Just click this one on the far right. This becomes the fixed point that all the rest of them are measured off. So this is 2.5 millimeters, and that seems about the right size for a grid for cross stitching. So I'm going to leave it as that, and I'm going to hit this button, which makes all of the circles, when I press it, be 2.5 millimeters away from each other. Not from the center, but from the edge of the shape. So that's fine, they look good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to group them. And what that means is I can currently grab any of these and move them around individually. I'm going to hit Command Z there to undo that. But I want to be able to move them as a whole line that's stuck together. So I highlight them all, and I'm going to hit Command G to group them. And now if I move one of them, I move all of them. So that's what we want for the moment. So we're going to highlight all these and hit Command C and Command F again, and just nudge it down. And I'm going to collect the two and just repeat this, taking all the lines I've done just to save time. You can do it one at a time if you want. Try to make sure that you don't have any overlapping each other, or the laser will read both of the paths that are on top of each other and try to just cut twice in that same area, which you don't want because it wastes time and can, make more scorching on your material. So now I have a pretty nice grid. Now this looks like they're pretty square, like that the rows are as far away from each other as the columns are, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'm going to, if you select any of these, you'll see that they're each rows because it copy pasted grouped as we did it a minute ago. But I'm going to select all of them. Then I'm going to just select the top row to make that the baseline, and then I'm going to go over to Align again, and I'm going to hit the vertical distribute, and they moved a bit, so they weren't exactly square, but they are now. So Now we have a nice grid and we can run that through the laser cutter through any material we want that you can cut with it. And there's your cross stitching grid. But you might want to do something else like you might want to say make a frame that you can cross stitch a border around. So you might want to put an image or some text or something in the middle. So if you want to do that, we're going to have to ungroup all of these for a second. So the easiest, quickest way to do that in this case is I'm going to select all of them like this. I'm going to go over to Pathfinder. Again, you can find that under Window if you need it. And I'm going to hit this button, which is Unite. This isn't really what Unite is for, but it works in this case. So if I hit Unite, it's made all of these be grouped together, but I don't want them to be. So what I do is I right click and I hit Ungroup. And now what we have is a grid of lots of little circles that can be moved individually again. So Command Z a couple of times to put it back. So let's say I wanted this as a frame and I want to put some text in the middle. What I would do is I would take my black arrow like this and I would select the middle of it to get rid of the ones I don't want in the middle. So now we have a frame and we want to make it slightly more square. I'll take another row. That. I'm not counting these, so I don't know if it's actually square, but you know, close enough. And I'm going to go up to the text tool here, the type tool. I'm going to select it. I'm going to click in the middle and I'm going to say hi. So I'm just going to select all that text. I'm going to paragraph and I'm going to make it so it's centered like this. And I'm going to change it to a different font. I'm going to change it to, I don't know, Courier maybe. And then I'm going to make it bigger because it's too small. So what we have then is a piece of text. If we ran this through the laser cutter, what we would have is it would cut out all of these holes so that you could cross stitch it, but it would etch the Hi Olivia into the surface of the material. Now, some machines will handle text like this. This is still editable. So, but some don't like that. So what we do is we right click and we go to create outlines. And now what we have is, if we go back to Command Y, it's a path like any other shape. So you can just run this through now and it should etch Olivia as a raster etch. It should cut these out. You might want to also put something like a rectangular frame around it so that it cuts out the border of the piece you want to cut. Now this has filled it in black. We don't want it to be filled black. We want no fill on it and we want the stroke to be pure red again. And again, it's way too thick, so we make it 0.001. And now you have something that should run okay through the machine. Okay, if you have any problems or questions about any of this, just give me a shout and I'll drop you an email with how to fix it. Okay, bye.